Thank you, friends, comrades, peace activists. Nick, of course, was lying when he said there are people up here more knowledgeable than he is on matters of peace and war. He's a font of wisdom and knowledge about these matters. And I also very much appreciated his acknowledgement of country. I often find that acknowledgements of country are ticker box exercises, including also on the left. And I often think, wow, those words are also said at the opening of BHP board meetings. And so I was very glad to hear different words acknowledging country at the start of this meeting. I personally think that without a treaty that gives land back, comprehensive land rights, compensation for stolen lands, is meaningless, really. Australia's meaningless as a democracy without that. Also, I was when Nick mentioned whether China is a threat, Richard Marles spoke a few weeks ago at a News Corp organised event in Adelaide to boost the weapons industry. And he, in his 15-minute speech, which is on the tube, he acknowledged that the defence analysis of the region, there is no threat of invasion to the Australian mainland. That is not what any of this is about. So China is not an invasion threat to Australia. Even the Defence Department says that. But this week, I'm sure many of you are of an age to have fondly know Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the movie by Frank Capra. And those who you should go, it's very good, 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. But this week we had Mr. Morrison Goes to Washington. His big idea, turn Henderson Naval Base in Perth into US base and keep paying me my filthy lucre, I think is his big idea. Scott Morrison is unfortunately confirmation of Bertrand Russell's aphorism from last century that the root cause of many of the world's ills is that the fools are so cocksure of themselves, while those with a wise head are often full of doubts. But his fawning and scraping for money and power reveals what AUKUS is really about. It's not about safety for the people of Australia. It is about US force projection into Asia. I'm sure you've seen the Utopia episode, which predates AUKUS, where they conclude a pre-AUKUS $400 billion defence spend is to protect our trading routes against our major trading partner. And they all think that's a very sensible idea. But that's the topsy-turvy world we are unfortunately living in. The end of the Cold War was meant to introduce a world at peace with itself. Remember that?
Yes.
But the intervening 35 years has shown beyond all reasonable doubt that the root cause of war is the global capitalist and imperial system itself. AUKUS is a manifestation of that. A slowly declining empire that emerged after World War II sees itself in relative decline. It would be a mistake to say that this started with Trump. The pivot to Asia, in fact, started with Obama and Clinton as well. Obama announced this in the Australian Parliament in 2011. It's worth watching that speech, and it's worth reading the article in Foreign Policy that Hillary Clinton wrote at the same time. Trump is just the latest crazy manifestation of it. And yes, there are divisions in the Trump camp about this, hence the review. But whatever the outcome of that review, what we face is a lose-lose situation for the Australian people. If AUKUS passes the America First test, which is what it's being put to apparently, albeit there could be an increase in the bill and some changes here and there, but that will show that what we have always said, AUKUS is about projecting US and imperial power into East Asia. If for some reason the US pulls out, which I think is very unlikely, the monies spent are lost. Australia looks like idiots, we lose. 1.6 billion down the drain. Which we've already heard another 800 million has quietly gone off to fill the coffers in Washington. And now we have the announcement yesterday of a 50-year agreement between the UK and Australia. $41 billion guaranteed to the UK is meant to create 7,000 jobs in England. Another example of how bad the defence industry is at job creation. Imagine 41 billion in childcare or health or education or the renewables industry. The economic multipliers are much greater in these industries. But yet we have the unedifying display of two Labor governments beseeching Washington to invest in war planning in Asia, and the faded empire in London demanding the right to assert its power still in Asia. Clearly there are divisions in their camp. Assistant Secretary of State Colby wants Britain out of Asia so that the United States can dominate. But what does unite them is their warmongering. So Australia is on the hook for billions. So much money, no guarantees of anything. Who signs up to such a crap deal?
Australia.
Interestingly, this week also, you may have seen the UK Cabinet Papers from 25 years ago. Ben Doherty in The Guardian dug this out, where there were, he said, in a scene-setting cable dated June 2000, prepared for Blair, the UK High Commissioner noted, Australia is going through one of its periodic bouts of angst over its place in Asia and the wider world, plus a charge. It said Australia took enormous national pride in intervention in Timor-Leste and is hoping its stocks have raised in Asia. However, it is worried. This is yet again a colonial power trying to find its way in the world. I think another speech of note in the last few weeks has been Anthony Albanese's John Curtin speech, where he tried to play up his independent role, but I actually think exposed his fawning before empire. He said of Curtin during World War II, two divisions of the Australian Imperial Force returning from the Middle East. Curtin wanted those troops for the defence of Australia. Churchill wanted them in Burma, and Roosevelt backed Churchill. Barely 2 months after Curtin had said Australia looked to America, America was telling us to listen to Britain. It said a great deal about the nature of our relationship to Britain up to that point, and indeed the character of Curtin's predecessors, that Churchill had assumed Australia will roll over. Well, Trump assumes Albanese will roll over. And what have we seen? A rollover on beef, a rollover on Iran, a rollover on Gaza. As far back as 1996, Keating said Australia needs to seek its security in Asia rather than from Asia. These words seem alien at the moment in mainstream Labor politics. But of course, Keating was talking about security for Australian capital. But we must have a broader and deeper vision for the Australian people and the great majority of us in the working class. Empire is not a policy. You cannot fix imperialism by changing the people in Canberra in and of itself. We need system change, not just government change. We need a system where the majority of society is truly in charge, where the Scott Morrisons of the world are in the dustbin of history. You have the warmongers in charge. I mean, Bob Dylan's Master of War rings true again. We need a democratic and socialist world. Weirdly, the Labor Party rules even allow for us to argue for democratic socialism. It's in the rules. Yeah, I'm winding up now. So what's next? The left of the ALP, in its very victory of becoming the Prime Minister, has disappeared. But an ALP left is inevitable. As the working class moves, there will be a left. We want to make sure in Labor Against War, it speaks for the interests of the great majority of people against war. It's not just we've had more than 100 party units pass motions against AUKUS. The Electrical Trades Union in Queensland a few weeks ago reaffirmed its position and has written to the Prime Minister calling for AUKUS to die. Next weekend, the Victorian ALP Conference is hearing 3 motions from Labor Against War. There's a good chance they'll be passed, but we'll see what happens. We need to organise inside and outside the Labor Party to make the move. So whether we have sign-up sheets if you are in the Labor Party to join Labor Against War. But we need a united peace movement, a united movement against militarism, and that's why Labor Against War is very happy to be here and work with you all towards achieving that. Thank you.